and welcome to Return to Regalia, an Underland Chronicles reread podcast. I'm Una.
And I'm Audie.
Today, we'll be covering Chapter 19 of The Curse of the Warmbloods, in which the questers finally find water and Gregor has a touching moment with Lapblood. Audie, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you back. What did you think of this chapter?
It is just there's so much to talk about. I understand why it's only one chapter for this episode because it's just so dense.
Yeah, truly. I was just talking to Nate about how we're gonna have to start doing fewer chapters per episode in these coming books because everything just gets so much more intense and there's so much more to talk about.
Yeah, totally. Which is crazy because it starts out so intense too.
Right? Yeah, it just gets like more and more.
Yeah.
All right. So, where we left off, Luxa was letting Gregor drown in quicksand. Chapter 19 begins with Gregor asking Luxa what she's doing. She asks what he's doing with the rats in the jungle and reveals that she knows Gregor spared the Bane, which she doesn't seem happy about. Gregor tells her that Nerissa approved of his actions, and Ripred chimes in to call Luxa a brat and explain about the plague. Luxa hasn't heard about the plague, but Ripred points out sarcastically that she's pretty isolated in the jungle. Hamnet enters and tells Luxa to help the quicksand victims, but he calls her Judith when he does. Luxa says she's not Judith, and Hamnet agrees, saying, "No, you are not. My sister would have never stood by and watched those who had risked so much for her die."
So devastating, first of all. Just his instinct to call out to Judith.
Right, like his first instinct when he sees someone who looks so much like his twin is to call her by that name, even though, like, logically he knows that that's not her.
Also, it is crazy how it's been such a long time since Luxa was home. Like, Ripred makes fun of her for not knowing about the plague, but honestly, the fact that she knows about the Bane is kind of shocking.
Right, I was wondering about that too. Like, how did she hear about that? And if she heard about the Bane, why hasn't she heard about the plague?
As a kid, I always thought it was crazy that, like, even with her limited knowledge, I was like, she's really just gonna let Gregor die in the quicksand right now. But honestly, from her perspective, I wouldn't know what to do either.
Yeah, that's true. Like, I also was like, wow, Luxa, that's kind of a, like, intense step to take just to, like, let him die and not even hear him out. But I think that after everything she's been through, just, like, hanging out in the jungle all this time and hearing about Gregor sparing the Bane without any of the context around that, I'm sure she has, like, she has had a lot of time to grow bitter about the situation, and I think that that's probably what's going on here.
Yeah, definitely.
Hamnet tosses Gregor and Ripred each a vine and pulls them out of the quicksand, but Lapblood has sunk almost completely under. Nike swoops in, grabs Lapblood, and manages to lift her head out of the sand, but Lapblood refuses to grab the vine. She asks to be let go, and the narration says, "Gregor realized it had all been too much. The months of starvation, watching her pups dying, this torturous trip, Mange's death, and Lapblood had decided that she no longer wanted to live," which is so devastating.
So fucking brutal. It would have been so easy if Suzanne Collins had wanted to like kill her off here too. Like it would have been such an easy just choice to make as the author, and the fact that she didn't is so important to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like Lapblood's arc of, like, she's one of this pairing with Mange, and we kind of see them as the same in that they are, like, the mean rats that are on this quest, and they're making fun of Gregor and, like, threatening Boots. But then after Mange dies, we really, like, get to see more of Lapblood and how she was probably different than Mange. And also, like, the fact that she doesn't get killed off and just, like, swept aside the way that Mange did. Like, she gets to have her own arc of, like, recovering from his death and having this moment with Gregor later in the chapter.
Yeah, the fact that like Gregor acknowledges like in the narration that she essentially has lost pretty much everything, but then that's not the end of her story. Like he gives her more to I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but like it's so good.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, we'll get to that. I can't wait. Gregor yells at her to not give up and reminds her about her pups, Flyfur and Sixclaw. That finally gets through to Lapblood. She opens her eyes and grabs the vine so the others can drag her out. When she's safely on solid ground, Hamnet asks Ripred if Luxa is really his niece. Ripred confirms, and Luxa realizes she's talking to Hamnet, who she thought was dead. Hamnet says, "We thought you dead too, Luxa, and perhaps better you were, if you can so unflinchingly watch the death of your comrades." Which is kind of harsh.
What a crazy thing to say. Like, honestly.
Yeah, even though, like, he's right that she's being terrible watching her friends die, but, like, it's also wild. Like, the first words to your niece, who, like, you don't really know that well, is to just be like, maybe you were better dead if you can just, like, watch your friends die. Like, that is so intense and totally uncalled for.
Yeah, it's very similar to like how harsh Hamnet was with Gregor upon first meeting him, and it's like, dude, these are children. Like at the end of the day, these are children.
For real. Yeah. Like, Hamnet needs to just give them a break.
Yeah, for such a pacifist, he's kind of a bitch sometimes.
Yeah, for real. Ripred interrupts their reunion by demanding that Luxa take them to water, and he threatens her nibbler friends while he's at it. Frill carries Gregor to a spring that pours into a pool, and he dunks his whole head into drink. By the time he's done, Luxa and the mice have vanished, and Hamnet is giving Boots and Lapblood water. He tells Gregor to wash the sand off himself, and Ripred explains how it'll harden like cement soon. Ripred dives in and then comes back out to groom his coat. Gregor is so caked with sand he has to jump in still clothed. It's a relief to swim in the cool water, and when most of the sand has fallen away, he strips down to his underwear and takes off the reptile skin shoes that Hamnet gave him. His toes are the size of walnuts and embedded with sand, which is really gross.
Yeah.
And he has to soak them in the water before he can peel off the bandages. I always liked this part because it describes how when he takes off the bandages, his old, like, acid-burned skin comes off too, and even though that's really gross, it, like, describes his new skin that's, like, growing underneath.
Yeah.
And just, like, the relief that he feels of, like, drinking water and also being able to swim in this cool water and, like, wash all the sweat off and wash his clothes and, like, take off his bandages. It's described so well, and you really, like, feel that relief, like, washing over you while you're reading.
Yeah. It's like refreshing just to read it. I was like jotting down notes before this episode, and one of them is just water equated with life question mark. Is this anything? And I never expanded on that, but it's really, yeah.
I think you're right, though. I think there is definitely, like, some of that in there. I mean, quite literally, you can't live without water, but, like, just the fact that they get to the water and it's almost like it gives them more hope for this, like, whole quest, and the ability to, like, bathe and wash your clothes is so vital as well. It's not just about drinking the water, it's about, like, everything that the water can offer. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
So I think you were onto something with that.
It's like in my like sixth grade social studies class when we had to think about why so many civilizations settle next to water, and it's like, why do you think?
Yeah, that's a no-brainer. By the time Gregor's done bathing and washing his clothes, Luxa has reappeared with fish and fruit to eat. She says she'll grill a fish for Boots because she knows she won't eat it raw. I was just thinking, like, she's come such a long way since the first book. Because, like, when we started this series, she'd never prepared food before and didn't know how to make a sandwich. And now she's, like, cooking food for Boots, and no one even had to ask her to do that. She just, like, offers. And I also love that she remembers from the Bane trip how much Boots hates raw fish, so she offers to cook it even though she knows, like, Hamnet or Gregor could have done that themselves. Like, Luxa is just like, I'm gonna do this for Boots, because Boots is the only one here that I like right now.
Yeah, it's very telling. And she definitely had a lot of time to grow bitter while in the jungle, but it's honestly probably taught her. I mean, we saw her grow a lot as a person and a character throughout, like in the first book, but also a lot in the second book, like now that she was separated from Henry. But I would love to know more about the time she spent, like basically on her own in the jungle and how much that shaped her as a character, because Like right now, she's maybe being a little childish towards Gregor, but when we see her in the next book, she's like a whole different person.
Yeah, you're so right. I would give anything to read Luxa's side of after the serpent attack in the second book and how they split off. I just think that that would be such a odyssey of like her and Aurora making it to the jungle and like how they found the mice and how they have like survived. Yeah,
Yeah,
that would be like so fun.
Suzanne Collins, I'm on my hands and knees, please.
Same. Gregor digs into the food, not minding the raw fish, and helps Boots eat some fruit. Luxa brings over the grilled fish, which she's also added some fruit juice to, which honestly sounds delicious. She doesn't look at Gregor, but asks Boots if she'll eat the fish. Boots agrees and asks where Twitch Tip is by pressing her hand to her nose to mean the rat's injured nose. Gregor realizes the last time Boots saw Luxa was when they were with Twitch Tip in the labyrinth. Luxa doesn't know where she is, and Ripred figures she's dead but that no one will miss her. Gregor declares that he'll miss her, and Ripred says, "Sorry, I forgot what chums you'd become, but she's just another dead rat to you, right, your queenliness?" And Luxa just keeps ignoring everyone except for Boots.
God, it's so brutal on so many levels.
Right? I don't understand why Ripred, like, keeps being mean about Twitch Tip. Like, seriously, what does he have against her?
No, for real. Like she was so cool, just a straight up down to earth rat.
Yeah, and I feel like Ripred should be more respectful by now. Like, yeah, I don't know why he keeps like talking bad about her behind her back like this, especially like in front of Gregor and Luxa who like went on this journey with her and have grown like fond of her.
Yeah, Riprid is such a mean girl, to be honest.
Yeah, for real. I also like how he's kind of like calling out Luxa though, in that like she's just another dead rat. Because I think Ripred is trying to call attention to the fact that like Luxa almost let Ripred and Lapblood and Gregor die because they were rats or working with rats. And then he's like calling her out on her hypocrisy because he does know that Luxa is allies with Twitch Tip. So he's like mocking her by being like, she's just another dead rat to you. But like clearly that's not true and he knows that. So he's like pointing out her hypocrisy there, which I think is really smart.
Yeah, everything Riprid says is like so deliberate and motivated.
Yeah, he's really good at like saying exactly the right words to like get under someone's skin.
Yeah. It's also the fact that like Twitch Tip is presumed dead here, like both by Riprid and like I think Gregor even he doesn't really disagree. Like he's just kind of like, yeah, she's probably dead. But then like when she's actually confirmed dead, like 2 books later, it just hits so much harder than just believing she is.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think even if Gregor believes at this point that Twitch Tip probably is dead, there's still that hope that we're gonna see her again. And like, I definitely had that as a reader when I was a kid. I just like assumed like Twitch Tip would show up again at some point. So it does hit really hard when in the last book we like get confirmation.
Yeah, of all the deaths, that's the one where I feel like Suzanne Collins pulled a fast one the most because, like, I don't know, you just truly hope and think that she'll come back at some point, and then she just doesn't and dies off screen, and it's just so brutal.
Yeah, truly. And I think it's even more brutal to think that, like, at this point in the story, in Curse of the Warmbloods, she's probably still alive because
Yeah,
in the last book they get that message in the Code of Claw, and at this point the Code of Claw hasn't been, like, developed yet, so it's, like, recent in the fifth book. So at this point, like, she is actually still alive, and just, like, getting that news that she was alive the whole time up until now is extra devastating of like, oh, we could have been out there looking for her and we could have been able to see her again, but then now it's too late. Like that is really what is so brutal about Twitch Tip's death.
yeah, totally.
Gregor wonders why Luxa's upset and decides it's probably a combination of a lot of things, like how Hamnet scolded her and how the Questers aren't there to rescue her, it's just a coincidence that they ran into each other in the jungle. He also wonders where Aurora is and figures she must be dead, since if she were alive, Luxa would have flown home by now. Gregor starts to feel bad for her, then remembers the quicksand and thinks, I don't owe her a thing. But he doesn't really believe that because she's saved his and Boots' lives. I love that he's like thinking like, man, like I hate Luxa right now. She almost let me die. But like he is also simultaneously thinking back to when Luxa has saved his life and more importantly Boots' life. And he knows that he still owes her despite what she's done recently and how she's acting towards him right now.
Yeah, Gregor is so good at thinking critically about whether or not his feelings are warranted, and like, I mean, it kind of also goes along with the fact that he is constantly diminishing his own feelings for like his parents or whoever else is in his life. But it shows a really intelligent side of him where he can be feeling this angry and upset, but then also be like, well, she suffered a lot too, and she did save my life and Boots' life, and it's just like he's so much better at that than I could ever hope to be, honestly.
Yeah, no, he really is good at that. And you're right about how, like you said, he's always diminishing his own feelings. Like, I think that goes hand in hand with, like, he does have this really good ability to, like, set aside his own feelings and think about others, like how other people are feeling and have sympathy for them. But then that also kind of backfires when he, like, sets his own feelings aside too much and it becomes kind of, like, harmful to him that he's always putting others first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
truly an empath to a fault.
Yeah, a little bit. When they're done eating, Gregor gives Boots a bath, and then they both go to sleep. He wakes up to Ripred telling Lapblood to get up and wash the sand off her fur. She hasn't moved or eaten since they got to the pool. Ripred finally just drags her in and out of the water by force. He says she needs to groom her coat to get the rest of the sand out, but she's still totally unresponsive. Ripred threatens her and is about to bite her when Gregor tells him to leave her alone. Ripred complains that if Lapblood doesn't pull herself together, all he'll have for backup in a fight is, quote, a handful of pups, a lame bat, a crawler, a couple of pacifists, and a rager who freezes up. And I know that, like, one of the pacifists is Hamnet, but does that mean that Frill is the other pacifist?
And Hazard, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah, but then he also says a handful of pups, so I think that,
Oh, right.
like, Boots and Hazard are the pups. And if Frill wasn't included in the pacifists, like, he would have said, like, and also a giant lizard.
Yeah, I guess so. We don't really get much from Frill ever, but I mean, I guess that makes sense that she's equally pacifistic.
Yeah, I think that at some point later, Hamnet talks about his pacifism, and he references how Frill lives as, like, instead of fighting, she tries to run away and then tries to make herself look bigger with the ruff on her neck
Yeah.
and, like, scare away the danger. And he kind of, like, follows her example in that way. And I wonder if Frill, it's more intentional than just, like, that's how she is as a lizard. I wonder if she, like, purposefully taught Hamnet that and he, like, learned how to be a pacifist from her.
Yeah, that's so interesting.
I really want to know, like, how they became friends. Like, what is the backstory to Hamnet finding Frill? Was it after Hazard's mom died or before? And were they, like, all a family together? Or, like, I have so many questions and we're never ever gonna get the answers, but, like, I need to know.
Sometimes a family is a mom, a dad, a half-lander child, and a giant lizard.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, I mean, humans don't really go to the jungle. I guess other creatures do, but like the fact that Frill knows English is honestly kind of surprising, unless she learned from Hamnet.
Oh, yeah, you're right. That is a good question of, like, where did Frill learn to speak English? Huh. Yeah, I wonder if Frill could be, like, from somewhere else in the Underland and have also, like she also ended up in the jungle somehow. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't see any other giant lizards in the jungle, also, which I feel like we'd see them if they were there, but maybe not.
Right, right. Maybe they just stay hidden really well.
Yeah,
But it is interesting to think, like, why would, if the giant lizards do live in the jungle, like, why would Frill decide to live with Hamnet and Hazard instead of living with other lizards?
yeah.
I wonder, like, I need to know if Suzanne Collins like actually has a backstory for Frill, or if she was just like, I don't know, like the readers can think whatever.
Yeah, I read recently, and it was like an interview she did after Songbirds and Snakes came out, like the movie, and it was like she mentioned that she has like a Hunger Games Bible that has like as many details as you could possibly need to know about the universe and the series, and I really hope that she has something like that for the Underland Chronicles, and I would pay any amount of money to see it if it exists.
Whoa, I did not know about the Hunger Games Bible. That is so cool. And same, I would give anything to read that. Holy crap.
Yeah, it said she like knew the exact time that like the three-fingered symbol in the Hunger Games like would have been invented. And so I think they were shooting a scene in Songbirds and Snakes where they used that salute and then she had to be like, "Oh, that wouldn't have existed yet." And it's like, "What?"
Oh, that is so interesting, actually.
Yeah. So maybe she does have like a whole Frill novella or something.
I wouldn't put it past her to have like a whole backstory thought out that just like never came up.
Yeah.
Oh my god, Suzanne Collins, release the Frill info.
Release it.
Ugh. Also, I just want to point out that like Rip Red is saying that Lapblood would be like the only backup in a fight, but like even though they are pacifists, Hamnet and Frill can still fight if they need to, and we've seen that Hamnet is pretty good at like I don't know, maybe not fighting, but like disarming everyone because he did it to like Solovet's guards when they first met.
Right. I think also I'm very intrigued by Ripret's whole reaction to Lapblood's like full-on grief and depression because like surely he knows what this is like, this level of grief and just being so I mean like he lost his pups and his family. And I'm so curious to know what he was like before he lost his family and like what leads him to being so cruel to Lapblood now. Like obviously he's focused on survival and he's always like thinking ahead, but the fact that he isn't giving her any sympathy whatsoever when even when he recognizes when Gregor needs him to just like level with him and be real, but he's just not giving any leeway here.
Yeah, you're so right. He has like no sympathy, and it's so strange because you're right. I hadn't considered that. Like, he knows exactly what Laplet is going through. And like, Gregor has this whole thing in this scene where he like sees Lapblood's grief and really relates to it, and they have this moment over it together. But like, Ripred is not giving her the same empathy at all. And it's like, man, you know what that feels like. You've been in the exact same situation. Like,
Yeah. Even if he was to approach this situation specific, like only from the perspective of getting what he wants, like clearly just yelling at Lapblood and showing her no sympathy isn't working. So I don't know what. Usually he can just like switch gears and like emotionally manipulate, gaslight, gatekeep girl boss, but he's just staying on it, and it's like, what are you doing?
yeah, like why does he think that this will eventually work? And I'm wondering if he's just like feeling really hopeless about the situation and he knows that he needs to get Lapblood up and moving and he doesn't have any other way to do that. Like, I don't think that at this point he can like summon it within himself to expend that emotional energy on like being empathetic and like talking her through this. Or maybe he just doesn't think that would work any better.
Yeah, it's like what you and Nate were talking about last week with the pitcher plants, where he's like genuinely angry, but also probably so panicked that they almost just lost absolutely everything.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that Ripred is probably feeling really panicked about the whole situation and he is like responding by just lashing out cuz that's just his defense tactic. Like that's all he can rely on.
I think maybe like one good therapy session could fix him.
Just one.
Yeah, I mean, assuming he didn't like eat the therapist, which is possible, but like one really good one where they just get into everything and he'd be good.
Yeah, yeah. I think that he's like ready for that. He just like doesn't want to. Like he has the capability to start unpacking everything he's been through, but he just like doesn't want to.
Yeah. Honestly, they need more of a mental health focused society in the Underlands. Like that would fix so many of their issues.
Oh my god, yeah. I wonder what What's the mental health situation in Regalia? Like, what's the healthcare system like? Can we just, like, get a therapist for free, or do you have to be, like, royalty to get that treatment?
Yeah, even Luxa, like get her in on a red couch or whatever.
Yeah. Nope, all she has is Vicus, who is more or less fine, I guess.
Yeah, they'll just start talking about hope and prophecies and
Yep.
diplomacy.
Gregor throws a plum at Ripred before he can yank out some of Lapblood's fur with his teeth. Ripred wasn't hurt by it, but he's surprised Gregor would defy him like that. Gregor says he'll groom Lapblood's coat himself and gets out Boots' hairbrush. Ripred says, "This I've got to see," and sits back to watch. Lapblood is still soaked and slightly sandy, so Gregor pats dry a patch of fur on her back with his own shirt before brushing it. I just love that he uses his own shirt because he just washed that and he had like laid it out to dry and it's the only shirt that he has and he's just like getting it dirty again so he can help her. Like that's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's so good. And he doesn't even like make a thing of it. It's just like, okay, this is my shirt, this is what I'm gonna use. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, I love how Gregor is just like as soon as he knows what he needs to do, he just does it and like commits to the bit fully.
Yeah. I am obsessed with him throwing a plum at Ripred. It's just so funny.
Yeah, that's so good. Really iconic. And also just the fact that Ripred isn't like he doesn't know how to react to that at all. He's just like, "Did you just throw a plum at me?"
Yeah. Like, yeah, so what if I did?
It takes forever to brush Lapblood's back, but Gregor doesn't stop because everyone is watching him, including some mice from the jungle, and probably Luxa too. He finishes brushing her back and asks her to roll on her side so he can get her belly. She whispers to him, asking if he thinks her pups are still alive. He says yes and tries to remember what Mange told her. Gregor assures her that they'll have the yellow flea powder by now, and that mincemeat will feed them, but he knows he didn't get that name right. It's actually Make Mince. I still love that he just goes for it. He's like, I don't remember this name of this other rat, but like Lapland needs to hear it no matter what. So even if I get it wrong, I'm just gonna try my best here.
Yeah, she'll get it. Also, I forgot to mention it, this was a little bit earlier, but when he says, like, he'd brushed dogs before, how different could it be? Is the same level of misplaced confidence as in, like, the first book when he sews Aurora's wing? Like, what do you mean, how different could it be?
Like, that's so right. When he's like, "Well, I've sewn buttons onto clothes. Like, I can do a bat's wing."
He's absolutely crazy.
That's so right. That's like the exact same energy. Like, for real.
I mean, to his credit, it works out both times, but like that level of audacity, I could never be that confident.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I love about him is he's just like, you know what? I'm gonna try this thing, and if it works, it works, and if not, tried my best.
Yeah, that's honestly like his God-given right as an 11 to 12-year-old.
So true. Even though Gregor got Make Mince's name wrong, Lapblood agrees, and when Gregor tells her to get some sleep, she drifts off. Gregor thinks about his own loved ones back in Regalia with the plague, figuring that Howard and Andromeda are probably still okay, but his mom must be really sick, and Ares is probably already dead. Gregor pushes that thought aside and finishes grooming Lapblood's fur. The narration says, "It was funny how he and Lapblood were like two sides of one coin. A mother fighting to save her kids, a kid fighting to save his mother. He thinks that's why he had to stop Ripred from hurting her." The chapter ends with, "He would like to have explained that to all the spectators, but he didn't have the words. So instead, without bothering to clean out the brush, he groomed his own hair." And that's the end of the chapter.
God, the thematic implications, the themes.
For real. It's so powerful. It's one of the most powerful scenes in the series, I think.
Yeah, it totally is. Just that like little detail of like using his own shirt to dry her and then like using the brush in his own hair, which he didn't even or I guess he probably didn't need to brush his own hair at this point because he was also covered in sand and all that, but
Mm-hmm.
like that was purely like gestural and like to show. Yeah. I just groomed this rat and we are two sides of the same coin and I'm going to brush my hair with the same brush. And it's like he knew exactly what he was saying when he did that, and it makes it even more impactful.
Yeah, for sure. And just the fact that he doesn't have the words to explain what he's feeling, so he does this action instead, and he lets that speak for him, and he knows that everyone is watching him, and instead of trying to explain it with words, he's just like, they can figure it out from this. Like, just gonna do this, and they're gonna have to figure out what I mean.
Yeah. And this book, it is my favorite. I know a lot of people have been saying the same. And it's my favorite particularly because it's such like a turning point in the series as a whole. And I feel like this moment embodies that more than like any other scene in the whole book, in the whole series. It's just like fully the moment where like something switches. Like it's a gradual change that like the first two books and the first half of this book, they do build up to it, but it's this specific moment where it's something clicks with Gregor about like the rats and what he's been told ever since he first came to Regalia, and like how they don't have to be so different.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good way of putting it. Because this book is such like a turning point. Just like turning point after turning point. Like we just get so much recontextualization of how the Underland works, how the rats work. And Gregor just has like revelation after revelation. It's so good.
Turn and turn and turn again.
Oh my god. Yes, literally.
Yeah.
I actually found a post by Tumblr user Antique Symbolism that does a great job of summarizing why this scene is so great. And I'll reblog it to the Return to Regalia Tumblr so everyone can read the whole thing later. But for now, I'll just read some quotes. Antique Symbolism says that this scene is, quote, the moment Gregor truly internalizes the humanity of rats, because even though he's like shown respect for Ripred and Twitchtip before now, him relating to Lapblood's grief here is what proves to him that there's no difference between the humans and the rats. And the post also points out that Lapblood is currently surrounded by people who hate that she's a rat, and the only other rat, Ripred, isn't showing her like any compassion. And he's also like saying that he only wants her to be up and moving and functional because like he needs her in a fight, not to have around as another rat, but just like he needs another able body to be able to fight. So like Laplet is feeling like really isolated right now, I bet. And then Gregor comes to help her in this like very intimate yet public way. And the post calls this scene a calculated, gentle display of compassion, which I just really love because it is calculated. Like the way that Gregor does this is like he's using his compassion as like a tool to show others like how to be. Like he is setting an example and showing them that this is possible to like care for a rat in this way.
Totally. Yeah. I think I've seen that post before. I love a good antique symbolism post.
Yeah. And then, yeah, like we were talking about, Gregor just like drives home his point by brushing his own hair with the same brush that he used on Lapblood. And the post says, her fur mingling with his hair, as if to say, this is not my enemy, this is my kin. And like, this is just like what Suzanne Collins is all about. Like, this is radical kindness. This is like revolutionary kindness that I think both Gregor and Katniss exhibit. Like, they're both driven to act by this like intense compassion for people.
Yeah, totally. God. And they're both so young.
I know, right? But they set such a good example.
Yeah, I really like the way, like, the difference in how that kindness is portrayed through Gregor and Boots, because with Boots, it's definitely meaningful, but it's more so that she's just so young that like she hasn't been taught hate in that way, and she hasn't been given a reason to hate or like discriminate in the way that others have. And with Gregor, like I mean, he's told all of these things about the rats from the first moment he sets foot in the Underland, and he's not even from that world. He immediately just like buys into all of that. And I think the fact that we see him like one buy into this world in general, because if he was just doing this after only spending like a few days in the Underland, I don't think it would be as impactful. It's the fact that he's like fully invested now. He's done 2.5 prophecies. He has like friends here, and he just like kind of rejects this narrative at this point. It's just like it's a different level from what we see with Boots, which is just this pure or childlike naivete and innocence. And he's just like making the conscious point to unlearn it and reject it. And it's just so cool.
You're absolutely right. Like, the thing that is most powerful about Gregor doing this here is that he is consciously choosing to reject the social norms that he has been taught since he arrived in the Underland. And Boots exhibits this kind of like purity in that you're right, like she hasn't learned hate and she doesn't know how to like she hasn't been brainwashed, and Gregor has been brainwashed like enough by now to be thinking about the rats a certain way. And then the fact that he is like able to go against that, basically, that he's like, I see how it is and I see how you are expecting me to behave, and I am on purpose going to do the opposite of what you're expecting me to do. And that is more powerful because he's making this choice.
Yeah. And then we see Luxa progressively make this choice more and more, which is like, it's even more, I mean, impactful within the world because she's like a person of power. And it's like, I don't know, something, the youth are the future. Like,
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love how Luxa learns from Gregor so much about like he just like comes into her life and starts like questioning everything, and Luxa is like so annoyed by him but eventually starts to like get it, and I love that growth for her.
yeah, there's like nothing about her arc that feels unnatural or unrealistic because we really do see it from pretty much start to finish. And it's just gradual enough that it makes sense, but also she's being forced to make these really quick, like to really quickly think critically about what her beliefs are and to make these decisions because she has to. And it never feels like too drastic of a change in her.
Yeah, I agree. It's really gradual over the 5 books, and she has a lot of like regression too, like how she's ready to let Gregor and the rats die in the quicksand is like she has been through a lot and has kind of regressed to how she was at the beginning when we first meet her, like this kind of cold and brutal person. So she has like setbacks and there's like ups and downs in her arc, and I think that that just is so real, and it's great to see her kind of like overcome that again and again.
Yeah, totally.
Did you have any other thoughts about this chapter that you wanted to share?
I don't think I have anything like super insightful. At one point in my notes, I just wrote, I love when girls are angry, which is probably about Luxa, but just as a general note, also important, I guess.
No, that's so right. I do love that she gets to be pissed off in this. Like, even though it is kind of like a setback in her arc and she's not justified in like being angry at Gregor for this, like, I love that we get to see that from her. Just like she gets to be pissed off and like show this intense emotional reaction to the situation.
Yeah, and that her feelings are like fully acknowledged by like Gregor and the narration, and like he disagrees with them, but he also rationalizes them and totally gets it, so that we as the reader also get it, and it's so good. Good for her.
Right. Yeah, we're never like, oh man, I hate Luxa now because she's being so mean. Like through Gregor and the narration, we get the side of it of like, oh, she's been through a lot and we can see where she's coming from and why she might be acting the way she is. I think that's so nice. You don't see that in a lot of books, I feel like.
Yeah, and it's totally different from like the first book when we first meet her, and she's just like such a royal brat, basically. But this isn't like that at all. Like she's definitely matured, and even if her feelings now are coming from a place of ignorance, still, she's very much thinking more as a ruler and less as just like some child like goofing off with Henry. It's her being like, okay, this is Gregor. I know that he didn't kill the Bane like he was supposed to, so that probably makes him my enemy. And she doesn't have all the facts to be making that connection, but she is thinking in a more mature way.
Yeah, you're so right. It is like different. It's not a complete regression. It's like because she has grown up a lot since the first book, and it's not her just being like petty. Like she thinks that she really has a reason to be this angry.
Yeah.
And we're like given that reason by the text, which is really great. Just being shown the nuance of that and like Gregor and Lux's conflict. And I can't wait to like get to more of it in the next chapter.
Yeah, yeah. I really loved the realisticness, I guess, of Lapblood's grief in this moment, where it's not just like Gregor is
Mm.
like, your pups, and then she's like, oh, my pups, and then she's totally fine. Like it's enough to get her out of the quicksand, but then we see her totally go back to this dark place in her mind, and it's just like it's such a great portrayal.
Yeah, you're right. I hadn't considered that, but I do like that how he is able to like give her enough hope to get out of the quicksand, but then it doesn't really last. Yeah, you're right. I don't have anything to add. That was a good point.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining me, Audie.
Thank you for having me again.
Always a pleasure. The next episode of Return to Regalia will cover Chapter 20. Don't forget that you can find all the links to our social media and merch at returntoregalia.card.co. Thank you for listening, and until next time, fly you high!
Bye, you high.